welcome everybody. I'm Diana Ingram. I'm the executive director here at Hill Center at the Old Naval Hospital. And I know there are a few people who've never been here before. Could you raise your hand? Well, welcome. Please come back. Please check out our website. This is the very first naval hospital that was built in Washington, D.C., commissioned by Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War. So we're so pleased that it's been turned into an arts and cultural center. This evening, it's a great pleasure to welcome our guests, Iranian journalist Fatemeh Jamalpour and Holly Degres, who is the Libitsky Family Senior Fellow at the Washington Institute. Holly is also the curator for the popular weekly newsletter, The Iranist, on Substack, and she is an Iranian American who has very close ties to the country. Fatemeh is a journalist, an author, and a witness to a remarkable time in Middle Eastern history. The story of the Iran's women-led uprising in 2022. And she's a very brave person, and it is indeed an honor to have you here with us today. We are recording this event. Our guests will be in conversation, and then we'll open up for Q&A. So please wait for the microphone so that we can record it. Our friends from East City Books are here outside in the hall. So if you haven't bought a copy of the book, For the Sun After Long Nights, which has a fabulous cover, I encourage you to do that. Please take a look at upcoming events. Please take a moment to turn off your mobile devices, if you would. And now I'm going to turn it over to Holly to kick off the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us, Hill Center. I'm certainly one of the people that have not been here, but I'm delighted to. It's an honor on this Friday night, and thank you all for taking the time on this holiday weekend to be here to discuss an important matter that's near and dear to all Iranians' hearts, which is the Women, Life, Freedom movement. So I've obviously spent some time reading this book, For the Sun After Long Nights, and I have to say it was a heavy read for me as an Iranian American. I followed the story of the uprising in 2022 very closely, and this book isn't just a testament to a modern Iranian history, but it's also part memoir of Nilu Tabrizi and Fatemeh Jamalpour and their stories that intersect in different ways, not just because of their Iranian identity, but their ties to this incredible part of modern Iran that's still ongoing despite not being part of headlines today. But I think the fact that it's been a little over 3 years now since the uprising, it tells you that this is still a movement and that it still continues. So I'm hoping we can unpack that tonight with Fatemeh June. And so without further ado, we're going to start. So before the Women, Life, Freedom movement, Fatemeh, you were already on the radar of the Iranian security apparatus. I know for a lot of us here in Washington, we've been familiar with the brutality of the Islamic Republic for 46 years. But Fatemeh, I'm going to read a part from your book to describe what it was like for you specifically as an Iranian journalist. So I'm reading the section from Fatemeh. It says, I did many reports about IRGC corruption at Sharq, but Sharq being the newspaper she worked at. But instead of corrupt officials being held accountable, it was often I who ended up in court. That was when I realized it does not matter how hard we work to shine a spotlight on government misdeeds, because the judiciary system was one of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' most powerful and entrenched supporters. As such, it began to feel as if rather than affect change, our reports can only serve to document and archive our present reality for future generations. So I'm hoping you can unpack that more for all of us.
Sure. So 6 months before the movement started in Iran, I was working at BBC in London as a BBC World Service journalist. And I knew that I might be never able to return back when I made my decision to go to the BBC. But then I realized that my father got cancer. It was the most aggressive cancer, and I had to choose between my family and journalism. So I chose my family at that time. I returned back, and from my eyes, I was only a simple journalist who returning to take care of my, sick father. I got arrested in the airport. Many officers from Ministry of Intelligence were waiting for me. They had guns, they had cameras. Then I went through many interrogation sessions until the movement happened. And I use it as opportunity to write each interrogation session down because I realized that I'm facing the ideological core of regime. So I use my journalism skill and I was questioning them. It was not only me. While I know in Iran we don't have any independent judiciary system. And when we got arrested, we know that whatever the interrogator decided, it would be our charge. There is no independent judge. Then 4 days after movement, I summoned again. And they told me they're going to send my case to the court, revolutionary court, and my charge would be 2 to 5 years in prison. So I decided to return back to journalism. I sent email to Nilu, my friends at that time at New York Times, and I said, would you want to cover the protest together? She accepted. We started working. Our first story published in Paris Review. And I continue to work, and the result is this book. Yep.
I think sometimes it's hard for Americans to conceptualize how dangerous the work you're doing is, and even interacting with Nilu from afar, who was based up in New York while you were in Iran. So one of the paragraphs that really resonated with me that also tells the story of the uprising, I'm going to read from that. It says, days later, I was almost arrested again at the intersection of 16th of Azar Street and Keshavarz Boulevard. I was trying to take a photo of a girl with long hair walking down the street with the armed forces in the background. One riot officer stopped me and tried to take my phone. I turned to run, but he grabbed my backpack with my notes and my laptop inside. Then, at that very moment, a crazy thing happened. The passing traffic stopped, and men, ordinary men, leaped out of their cars and off their motorcycles and ran over to help. Let her go, they shouted, pushing the officer off me. That's how these protests were different. They were not divided by class or ethnicity or gender. We were all united.
Yeah, I think one of my observations during the protest was seeing the people how united and, because we know that after 1979 revolution, and months after that, the founder of Islamic Republic said that hijab is obligatory and all organizations are banned to let the employee without hijab. Women headed to protest. They protested for the 6 days, 1 million women across the countries. So it postponed the mandatory hijab. But at that time, women were alone. And Iranian men were afraid of mother Iranian men and were united with the Islamist extremist people. But during the time, I think Iranian men realized that they couldn't be free without Iranian women freedom. And they had to decide between Islamic Republic and women. And they choose women this time.
Just talking about the arrests, you've had multiple run-ins with the law and authorities, and I think maybe it would be interesting to share that story about how one time you had to lie that you were a wedding photographer, which you also tell the story of in the book.
Yeah. So when I finished my study in the US, I studied at Northwestern. Noura is my classmate from that time. And I decided to return back to Iran despite that I have work permit to stay in the US because I think I'm more valuable still there. So I returned back. A month after I returned back, another protest happened in Iran. It was the protest mostly for lower class people. And I was like, I want to cover it. And I got assignment from New York Times. So I headed the protest. I started to covering the protest, filming, interviewing. Then I got arrested. I got arrested and I didn't know who are the officer who arrested me. It's the things, because we have many security agencies and organizations in Iran. And if you got arrested, it takes time that your family understand who arrested you. So I remember that my knees was shaking until they took me to the van. Then they took us to the Molarity Police Headquarters, the place that they killed Gina years after. Gina Mahsa Amini was the Kurdish woman that the Molarity police killed her, and her death sparked this movement in Iran. So then they started to interrogating us 3 by 3. And I was sitting there. The first protester woman was a really, someone who working and cleaning the people place and was in the street to protest. So the officer asked her, like, your home is suburb and your workplace is there. What you did in the middle of the protest? So the woman said, Haj Agha is a religious title in Iran. Haj Agha got period in subway, in a station. Then I got to buy a sanitary pad for myself. Then I realized that I can't tell lies. Then they asked me, what's your job? And I said, I am a marriage photographer. And there was nothing wrong with being marriage photographer. So they released me without background check.
I also found it amusing in the memoir you were also telling a similar incident where a girl had a pocket knife and she was being also in the same sticky situation, and she lied to the authorities and said she was a cobbler, and that was her tool for fixing shoes.
Yeah, she was after me.
So, I mean, there's some amusing stories throughout. But what really also ties this beautiful book together is music and poetry, which played such a huge role in the 2022 uprising. And also the book itself, the title, the chapters are drawn from Iran-based singer Shervin Hajipour's song Baraye, or For the Sake of. I don't know if some of you remember this, but it actually won a Grammy in 2023, and it was handed by then First Lady Jill Biden. And so this has become the de facto protest anthem. And even as we're here 3 years later, people still sing the song or even chant its lyrics as a form of defiance in the country. So, Fatemeh, I want to hear more about what poem or song has particularly inspired you. I see a lot of it throughout, but there has to be one that really speaks to you more than others.
Yeah, sure. So I want to talk about Baraye at first. The Shervin Hajipour, the singer of Baraye, just a few days after the protest, sit in front of his Twitter, and he wrote down ordinary people tweet that they wrote why they are Islamic Republic opposition. And it was really normal thing, like for kissing my loved ones in the alley, for the normal of regret life. And also the book title came from that song, For the Sun After Long Nights. So it's got 14 million views in less than 2 days, and then the regime arrested him. But the song is still there and it's alive. And during the protest time, it was amazing because each day we heard new revolutionary songs from anonymous artists, a student artist, and they're asking, do you hear this new song? So I think it shows that how all these, generation, groups, artists, students was in the movement, participating in the most peaceful way by musician, by poetry.
I want to, again, it's funny that a lot of this has to do with security apparatus of the Islamic Republic, but I think it also shows you just how much it looms large in the people's lives in Iran. And I want to read this because it was very interesting to me. One day, I was sitting in the lobby of the Espinal Palace Hotel waiting for Miss Sadaqat. The interrogators were never on time, always arriving late by at least an hour. I was reading a poem by Hushange Ibtihaj and cried, feeling hopeless and tired of the uncertainty. And then she has a bit of the poem. Would you think, is the sail broken and has the lifeboat sunk? in this ruined land which happiness and joy have escaped from? Do you think life has reached a dead end? Be a river. It leaves behind all the stones. Keep going. No miracle is expected from the dead. Stay alive. And how I needed a miracle, Fatemeh writes. The miracle of freedom and not going to prison. I cleaned my tears with my scarf. Engrossed as I was in the poem, I did not see Miss Sedarat arrive and did not realize that she was watching me. What are you reading? She asked. The life poem by Hushainga Ibtihaj, I told her. She recited it from memory while we walked towards the elevator. She then led me to the third floor and into the last room in the corner. No miracle is expected from the dead. Stay alive, she said. This poetry is my favorite too. God will help you. The irony of that, your interrogator saying something like that. In that moment, I mean, when you're hearing her say this poem that you were holding on to for dear life, like, how did you feel?
So I realized that poetry is a common thing. Doesn't matter it would be a prisoner or interrogators. You know, it's making connection. But I know that I cannot trust that woman. During all the time that she tried to making trust, making friendship, you know, trying that she's a safe person, she wants the goodwill for me. I know that she's a security force that wanted to put me in the jail at the end. Yeah, I know that there is no sign of, you know, goodwilling in that kind of relationship.
I mean, you've been through so much. So I want to talk somewhat on a little lighter topic, which is the role of Gen Z in the Women Life Freedom Uprising. If you've been watching the headlines in recent weeks, there's been these Gen Z protests in the global south, and in the past 2 weeks, most recently in Morocco. But believe it or not, it was Iranian Gen Z that were the first to rise up against their government. And so you and I being a millennial, tell us more about what you were seeing that was so different about this generation of youth that were leading these protests in Iran.
Sure. So I think my generation who grew up after Islamic Republic, we tried to do reform, you know, we did whatever we could. We participate in election, we participate in the protest, shouting, where is my vote? I used to work for a reformist newspaper. We believed that we could bring the reform. But during the years, we realized that no, this regime couldn't, you know, there is no reform possible in this kind of dictatorship. But I think this Gen Z decided to leave whatever they want and pay for the expenses. So, and most of them know English, they are so open-minded, and they are secular. They want to live like all the Gen Zs across the over because they grew up with the internet. And one of the sad things that I'm reporting in the book about that is about the execution of Gen Z protesters. So when the regime realized that they cannot suppress this Gen Z after a few months being in the street, they started executing protesters with executing a young gamer, just only 23 gamer. And they brought him in the TV to confess that he got corrupted by playing video game. Because they realized the high number of, you know, these Gen Z playing video game, and they wanted to make a lesson from him. But we know that the fight is still there, you know, despite all of this execution. Yes, they affected the protests in the street, that they, you know, spread the fear. But the resilience is there, and people just honoring those names of executed people and their memory every time. So it's not they are forgotten.
And just on the topic of executions, we've had over 1,000 since January, and it's been the highest in 15 years. Iran is one of the leading per capita in executions in the world. Just to give you an understanding of how bad things are, they use this as a tool of repression, and it's actually gotten worse in the post-war climate because there's a lot of fear about the people rising up. So just to add to that. I noted this a little bit earlier, but I'm hoping you can unpack it a bit more. Again, the Women Life Freedom uprising has now evolved into a movement. It's still ongoing despite the fact it's not in the headlines. But I was hoping you could maybe explain a little bit more about the status and how it's being carried out day to day by ordinary Iranians, be it women, girls, Iranian men and boys.
So 2 years after the movement, the Iran Conservative Parliament passed a new hijab bills with huge, nonsense fine, penalties, sentence for women to suppress the protester, to control women's body. But women didn't retreat. So nowadays, million women walk in the street without hijab. I even saw the young girl in a sport bra running in the street. Yeah, they are taking their agency and the control over body in public bag. From my eyes, every time that each Iranian woman walk in the street without hijab is a revolution itself. And the regime cannot, arrest 20 million people. And I think we have won already. It's our victory. And movement is ongoing for sure.
And it's ongoing because it's not a movement about hijab. It's actually a movement for a quest for positive change. I would say overwhelming majority of Iranians want the clerical establishment gone. And this isn't some of us living in the diaspora echoing these ideas. It's actually what an Iran-based academic, Nasser Hadian, actually said in a New Yorker piece during the war. He said that 80% of Iranians don't support this regime. So take it from the guy that's inside the country, not even from us sitting here reporting on these very sensitive topics for the regime. I guess on that note of just talking about this being a movement and not being part of headlines, I think there's a lot of misconceptions, unfortunately, in Western media about Iran and even the Women Life Freedom Uprising. One of them I just mentioned was that this was a movement about hijab. It wasn't. The other, just to contextualize in the post-war climate, there's some people have been saying here in Washington that there's been a rally around the flag effect. But I know, Fatemeh, you and I have had these conversations about these misconceptions, and I'm hoping you can share a bit more about, from you and your perch as a reporter inside Iran, what are some of those other misconceptions you're seeing?
Yeah. I think one condition that really affected how the Western media cover Iran is that the regime only gave them permission to come to Iran and have visa, that they are only able to cover pro-regime rallies. So it's not impartial coverage. As Iranian, I know that. Like during the wartime, where they sent crew to Iran, like New York Times, they published the photo that for me as insider was look like 1980. Are the hijabi people, pro-regime people? You never see, secular people, ordinary people, mostly in their coverage. So I think one of them is the reason is that. And so it affected that people don't see our society movement and changes towards secularism. No, majority of Iranian people don't want Islamic Republic. We want referendum, and we want, a really peaceful transforming, not a crazy revolution 1979. No, we don't want execution for anyone. We don't want revenge for anyone. We only want peaceful transition.
And just to add color to that, over the summer after the war, we saw 17 activists, including Iran-based Nobel laureate Nargis Mohammadi, call for a referendum, and she said that this is a regime that is irreformable. And 2009 Green Movement leader Mir Hossein Mousavian made similar comments, who's been under house arrest since 2011, and 700 activists supported him. So there's a real call for change in the country, but I think what you see with Gen Z is that they're finding themselves wanting to be part of the world, and then having these clerics at the top who, in their own words, not mine, are geriatric, and even through the memes that they have, they compare them to cavemen and dinosaurs. It's true. It was very popularized during their uprisings, but they don't feel like they have any thing in common because they dress and they act the same as youth everywhere, as Fatemeh noted. So I think that should give you a sense about some of the misperceptions there. I guess the one other thing I think it would be really nice though if we can just unpack a little bit about the Me Too movement in Iran, just because we have time, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So believe it or not, Iran also had and has its own Me Too movement. And I just would like to add some color to that and have you explain that just a little bit from what you've seen.
Sure. So the Me Too movement started in Iran about 2 years after it started in the U.S. That the women started to talking about Me Too, like about the abuse of director, actress, about even sociology, some feminists. But the main actress of Iranian cinema, Taraneh Ali Dousti, ran a campaign that collected 800 signatures from the Iranian actress and asking for a safe place. And in response, regime opened the cases of propaganda against regime in the most of the cases against them. But those campaigns really affected that the sexual harassment decreased among, Iranian cinema and industries. And I think, it really affected. Doesn't matter how the regime responds it, in spreading awareness and also in protecting women.
You can see that despite living under an authoritarian regime and patriarchy with an archaic worldview, Iranian women are fighting back in just so many ways. And we have a phrase in Persian, Shirzan, lioness, and we have one sitting here with us, but you have a long line of Iranian women and girls that are Shirzans, and they're pushing back in so many ways.
You are.
I want to turn to now the audience for questions. I'm sure you must have many because this is not your usual Iran conversation. We've unpacked quite a bit in this time. So I would like to turn the mic to you guys.
Let me just give you the mic. Anyone have a question over on this side? Over here. Hi, you mentioned that 80% of the population supports their change. Yeah. And what's the 20% like? Is it geographically concentrated, or is it age?
Yeah, sure. So we have an organization in Iran called Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC. I don't know if you heard about them or not. So because I realized that there is less knowledge about them in Iran. This organization, funded by the Islamic Republic founder Khomeini, because he were afraid that the army of the previous king do a coup against him. So he collected the loyal people to the regime, and they were involved during the Iran-Iraq war, and during the time they expanded their cover to all economy. So they are the shadow state. They have the power over all, power. And this is the reason that most of Iranians asking them to be sanctioned and asking them to retreat from, being disarmed, retreat from the politics. And I think they are the most obstacles of free Iran. So those number mostly are the families of these people and the family of the people who are working for the regime. And also the regime has many, some supporters in all the countries across the cities to the religious people. But what I witnessed, one of my friends' mom religious stopped praying after they executed these young protesters. So people distancing themselves from, extremists and the regime. Yeah, I really see the society changes towards secularism.
And just to add to that, just to clarify, the IRGC is designated by the United States, and the Australians just pulled their embassy in Tehran and are going to be designating the IRGC as well, because there were 2 incidents of arson that were planned by the IRGC intelligence arm in Australia, and so they've stopped ties between the countries, Canada as well. But the IRGC is a very complex entity because it controls the economy, it controls army, it controls the ballistic missiles, So it has a cyber apparatus, so it's become a Praetorian Guard in a way, if you're not familiar.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd like to know what you think about the situation as it is in the last 2 or 3 weeks. It seems to me that the IDF effectively defanged and destroyed the Iranian Air Force. It's basically gone. Their missiles are useless. If I were in the IRGC, I think I would be finding somebody to get me a ticket out.
But we have no place to go.
I know that, but I mean, what I'm suggesting is, do you have a feeling that the regime is beginning to crumble, to show its real weakness?
So we have seen regime weakness since 2009. You know, it's nothing new for us. They have no legitimacy inside Iranian people. They just controlling the country by guns.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, but I meant not political weakness, but literally.
Yeah, we didn't
Physical,
accept that they were
armed
this much
weakness.
weak because they all of these years they say we have a great defense system. So this Israel attack shows that, you know,
It didn't.
they are not right. Yeah, but we are not happy about bombing our country because it increased, you know, the regime has arrested 20,000 people
Sure.
in the charge of espionage for Israel.
Yeah.
It raised the expenses for any, you know, opposition expressing opinion inside Iran because they labeling people to be pro-war and pro-Israel.
Sure.
And also we know that no bombing brings freedom. We see what
Yeah.
happened in Afghanistan and Iraq. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe just to follow up on that and maybe unpack, because I'm sure the audience is curious. How is the regime reacting post-war? We know that they're weak, but how are they projecting their thoughts and feelings about what happened with the war and what you've been seeing?
They're adding many, like any other dictator. They think that we are victory. They're publishing many, you know, articles about their victory, calling a day, you know, anniversary of this victory, and adding some lesson to children, you know, a school book about this victory in the 12 days war. So you never heard the truth from them. You know that.
So one of the things I think is interesting from the book and also from knowing you is the shortages of how actual people are living with less and less. And now we're talking about sanctioning again. Tell me about the daily life of people that are just trying to get by.
Yeah, it's really hard now. According to statistics, 30 million people living under poverty line from the 90 million. And inflation is day by day. You know, even when I was in Iran, I couldn't afford buying fruit 2 years ago. Less than now that the situation is worse and worse. Like, people cannot eat meat anymore. People cannot chicken anymore. They are only, you know, I'm talking about middle class, but people who are engineers, or, you know, teachers, or even doctors. They have to have working as a taxi driver to just be provide family table, basic groceries. They cannot go to any more trips, you know. People just forgotten having foreign trips because of the dollar rate to the currency. And they are just living, you know, trying to live daily, exactly. No future, no planning. Like my brother is 24, he's engineering, and one day he told me, I just, you know, do calculation, and I realized that I should work 100 years to will be able to afford just buying a simple, you know, 50 meters apartment. So, like my generation, we never could own a home, a car. Yeah, and all of them are, you know, well-educated, really talented, but just decided to live there and stay there.
You know, just to follow up on that, you were talking about the Divar, the Craigslist of Iran, and some of the things that you were reporting on, what you were seeing, like what mothers were doing, selling their... Do you want to unpack it?
Yeah, I saw in Divar, I was covering a story trying to see what people sell in Divar, because Divar is kind of Craigslist in Iran due to poverty. And I saw some mothers selling their hair. Some mentioned that it was during the Corona time, because I need to buy cell phone for my child to attend the school, I need to sell my hair. So yeah, it's like that.
Hi, I volunteer with Amnesty International, and we work for Vahid Afkari, several of our groups around the country. But are there who has been in prison since 2018? But do you have suggestions about how can we help? I mean, keeping pressure on, letting people know what's happening, and other organizations we can support.
Yeah, I think really raising awareness is important, and Islamic Republic really afraid of international pressure, and it always working. Just because I believe, raising awareness bring empathy, and empathy bring action. So I really hope this book bring awareness, and I hope you do that, Just spreading information about them, trying to keep them alive in the headlines and pushing pressure against the regime. I think these all factors working is how you can help. Thank you.
And just to follow up on that again, so 30% of the world's most popular websites are blocked in Iran. Masa Amini was a hashtag that went viral. I was hoping you could talk a little bit more about the internet, the importance of internet and social media for Iranians and for amplifying what's happening in the country, actually.
Yeah, sure. So people really use social media to pass censorship, to have access to the news. And whenever a protest happened in Iran, the regime shut down the entire internet to just, preventing people to have access and communication or send video of, the dead people inside Iran to the world. What aspect that I really observed was like how the family of the victim that got killed during the protest using social media to seek justice, as a tool to seek justice, to spread awareness about their killed beloved man, and it's really inspiring for me.
Hi.
Hi.
So I think most Americans before, let's say, right now, would hear you talk about 80% of the country is against this regime. And we would say, oh my God, 80%, of course, why can't you topple this regime? So given where we are right now in the US, what should we be doing?
I heard this question a lot.
Well, I'm glad I asked it.
In each of the events across the country. I think we should stand. We should not give up, like what the people are doing in Chicago. Because we know as much as we retrieve, extremists and fundamentalists go forward. Doesn't matter where they are. And they always, targeting women rights first. Doesn't matter. Because they are fundamentalists. So I think just, not being silent, doing whatever you can, sending letters, organizing protests, you should stand because it's really important time, I think, for the democracy, not in the US, for the world. Thank you.
A related question, because you mentioned, uprising continues, and I'm wondering what kind of strategies the activists are using now, right? Given the heightened levels of repression that you have discussed, what kind of strategies are they using to push the cause, even in the face of this repression?
Yeah. Like I can talk about one of the recent example. A political ward of Evin prison, female political ward, was being a really important place for opposition to raise their voice. They're going under hunger streak to protesting execution, like last week they did. So, and releasing, letter, spreading information about each casualties of regime, I think they are using all the form of the things that they can, like asking for a referendum. We see all of them are going, mostly about from even the prison. I think it's the reason that I can say that it's ongoing. People not, giving up.
Any other questions from the audience? Did I see a hand over there? No. So
I
Holly,
want to
do
say
you?
thank you to few people here. Can I? So I have Mohammad Mosaed and Ashraf here. Please stand. Mohammad was Iranian journalist, and he is still. He, during the one of the protests, he wrote a tweet about the internet shutdown in 2019. He did many investigative, great story about the economy, and he's now living in exile. And he's a real courage and inspiration to me. Thank you, Mohammed, for coming. And also, I have the really beloved ones here. I wrote about her in my acknowledgement. I'm going to read about June. So, to June Suzie, after I spent months living out of suitcases and moving 14 times, June Suzie offered me a small, newly built and designed home in her backyard in Silver Spring for 4 months for free. Her generosity, no bounds. Curious, I asked June why she had chosen to help me, to offer me her space without even knowing me. She told me her mother has been a journalist and has passed away a year ago. When her daughter Emma saw Nilu, my co-writer story on Instagram, shared through friends about an Iranian journalist in exile searching for a place to stay, she immediately thought of her mother. In her mother's memory, she decided to support me, but June's kindness went beyond giving me a home. She bought me a new phone, took me to the Social Security office, and helped me piece my life back together. Thanks, June. Thanks to all of you for your time. You know, I really appreciate your support, your care, and you're my hope. And thanks to my brilliant host and Hill Center.
Thank you both so much for coming. And, you know, the book is extraordinary. Our friends and neighbors, East City Bookshop, independent, woman-owned, are outside with the book. And Fatemeh will be signing. So Holly, Fatemeh, please, thank you so much for both being here.